On a quiet and ordinary night, I was driving home from work, following my usual route. The time was around midnight, and my town, situated amidst wooded areas, was known for its peaceful atmosphere. I was cruising along the road with the top down on my convertible, taking in the summer breeze. This road was flanked by a cornfield on one side and a stretch of woods on the other. As I navigated the road at about 50 mph, the tranquility was shattered by a sudden, piercing woman's scream that reverberated in the air. The scream echoed across the road, and in the dim light, I couldn't determine the precise direction from which it originated. In response, I slammed on the brakes, bringing my car to an abrupt halt. My curiosity and concern compelled me to investigate. Grabbing a baton from the back seat of my car, I stepped out and faced the woods. The urgent cry for help lingered, seeming to emanate from the left side of the road within the woods. The woman's voice trembled as she pleaded for assistance. Determined to help, I charged into the woods, fervently pushing through the undergrowth and branches. Guided by the woman's cries, I continued to sprint deeper into the woods, shouting back at her to keep screaming so I could locate her. Our exchange of cries served as a lifeline of communication, each of her pleas urging me forward. Nevertheless, a disconcerting realization began to dawn upon me. Despite my headlong rush, her screams remained unchanging in intensity and distance, as if she was stationary. As I pressed forward, I called out for her to provide me with her location. However, a chilling pattern emerged. Every time I shouted for clarity, her cries only returned about 5 seconds later, consistent in volume and distance. Doubt crept in, and a growing sense of unease gnawed at me. I started to question the authenticity of the situation, wondering if I might be walking into a trap. With a mixture of apprehension and urgency, I altered my course and hastened back in the direction of my car. The headlights of my vehicle were a beacon of familiarity amidst the dense woods. During my retreat, the woman's cries persisted, maintaining their unchanging cadence, as if mirroring my movements. An eerie notion began to take hold. Was I being pursued? Once I reached the comforting glow of my car's headlights, I climbed in and sped away from the unsettling scene. My mind was racing as I recounted the bizarre encounter. I immediately contacted 911 to inform the authorities about what I had experienced, in case they deemed it necessary to investigate further. However, I was adamant about leaving that place, eager to distance myself from the disconcerting incident. In the days that followed, I shared my unnerving story with friends and family, hoping to find some sense of closure. Yet, despite my attempts to move on, the incident seemed to cast a lingering shadow over my thoughts. Then, a week later, I was confronted with a chilling revelation that sent shivers down my spine. A news report detailed the discovery of a woman's lifeless body in the same area where I had heard the screams. The body was found by a hiker, walking his dog in the woods. Strangely, there were no apparent signs of foul play, leaving investigators perplexed. The location of the discovery eerily aligned with the spot where I had heard the cries for help. Although the vastness of the woods made it unlikely that the events were directly related, a haunting suspicion lingered. Could the screams have been connected to the woman whose body was later found? While rationalizing that the woods covered a substantial area, I couldn't help but entertain the chilling thought that the two incidents might be more intertwined than I'd initially believed. On a winter night, I embarked on a journey from Brooklyn to my friend John's cabin in Vermont. The main purpose of the trip was to enjoy a weekend of snowboarding. I had two vehicles at the time, a 2013 BMW 3 Series and a 2006 Ford F-150, which I was driving on this particular occasion. With my snowboarding gear stowed in the bed of the truck, I was about 45 minutes away from reaching my friend's cabin. The time was around 10 p.m., and the roads were enveloped in complete darkness as snowflakes fell from the sky. The area was quite desolate, with barely any other cars on the road at that hour. I had recently retrieved my truck from the mechanic after encountering numerous issues with it in the past. Unfortunately, this night proved to be no exception. The worst possible scenario unfolded as my engine suddenly began to overheat, pushing the temperature gauge into the red zone. Reacting quickly, I reduced my speed and pulled over to the side of the road. I allowed the engine to cool down before attempting to drive again. However, even at a reduced speed, the engine temperature surged back into the red, causing the vehicle to overheat once more. Frustrated by this unexpected turn of events, I was forced to stop the truck again. I lifted the hood, attempting to diagnose the problem. However, the combination of darkness and snowfall hindered my efforts. Frustrated and concerned, I decided to call my friend John for advice. As I reached for my phone, I realized that my T-Mobile signal was non-existent in the area, preventing me from making a call for help. The realization that I was essentially stranded in the cold began to set in. Feeling rather helpless, I decided to wait within the warmth of my idling truck, as it seemed that the overheating only occurred while driving. I glanced at my phone, contemplating how to proceed. After about 20 minutes, I saw headlights approaching from a distance. Seizing the opportunity, I turned on my hazard lights and stepped out of the truck, waving my arms to signal for help. The approaching car, a compact Toyota, came to a stop. The driver rolled down his window, and I expressed my gratitude for his assistance. I explained that my truck was overheating and asked if I could borrow his phone since I had no reception. The driver, seemingly a local, handed me his phone without hesitation. I dialed John's number and explained the situation. John recommended that I call a specific towing company in the area, and he assured me that he would come to pick me up. After speaking with John, I dialed the towing company's number, describing my predicament and requesting assistance. Throughout both phone conversations, the driver of the Toyota observed my interactions, and I got the sense that he might be a local who was familiar with the area's challenges. After concluding my calls, I returned the phone to the driver and thanked him for his help. He simply responded with a "You're welcome," and without saying anything more, he rolled up his window and drove away, disappearing into the darkness ahead. As I watched his taillights fade into the distance, a sense of isolation once again enveloped me. I retreated to the warmth of my truck, contemplating my situation. The surroundings were oppressively dark, and I could hardly see beyond the window glass, although the truck's headlights illuminated the immediate vicinity. Beyond that, it was a sea of impenetrable blackness. The isolation was palpable as I sat there, waiting for John and the tow truck to arrive. During this tense period of waiting, a loud banging sound erupted from the passenger side of the truck, causing me to jump in surprise. My gaze darted towards the source of the sound, and I was met with the chilling sight of someone at my window. In the limited visibility, I couldn't make out many details, except for the fact that the individual was cloaked in a large black coat with the hood pulled over their head. The stranger's voice carried desperation as they pleaded for help, urging me to open the door as they claimed to be freezing. Instinctively, I wrestled with my inner sense of caution as I contemplated what to say to determine whether this was a genuine plea or something more sinister. The situation took an unsettling turn. The individual outside grew more insistent, attempting to forcibly open the locked door and striking the window with increasing aggression. Their pleas turned to frantic pounding, as if their desperation was transforming into something darker. I considered my options, realizing that my safety was at stake. With adrenaline coursing through my veins, I engaged the truck's transmission and shifted into drive. In response, The individual outside registered my intent and escalated their efforts, banging harder on the window in a desperate bid to break through. As the truck started to move, their grip on the door handle tightened, and their actions became more frenzied. The unsettling encounter had now transformed into a dangerous situation, and I resolved to trust my gut instinct. Accelerating away from the scene, I left the stranger behind, hoping to escape their pursuit. I knew that continuing to drive despite my truck's overheating was a risk, but my primary concern was getting as far away from that individual as possible. As I gained distance, a peculiar sight caught my attention as I crested a hill on the road. The glow of taillights in the distance. I recognized those taillights. They belonged to the same Toyota that had stopped to help earlier. My heart raced as I processed the eerie realization that the Toyota had returned to the scene. I slowed down as I approached the parked car, rolling down my window to get a better look. The vehicle appeared empty, devoid of any occupants. However, my attention was drawn to the fresh footprints in the snow leading away from the parked car, confirming that the same individual who had previously pounded on my window was indeed the driver of the Toyota. Sensing the urgency of the situation, I accelerated once more, my truck's engine struggling against the dual demands of speed and overheating. I was intent on finding safety and escaping the potential threat that had materialized on this remote, desolate road. A few minutes later, relief flooded over me as I spotted the approaching headlights of a tow truck. I signaled to the driver with my lights, and he pulled over to the side. I explained the circumstances to him, including the recent encounter, and he quipped that he had arrived at the right time. The tow truck driver expertly attached my truck and towed it away, providing me with the means to finally escape the unsettling setting. I used his phone once more to contact John, updating him on the situation and confirming our plans to meet at a body shop. My ordeal was nearing its end as I handed the tow truck driver's phone back to him, grateful for his assistance. In hindsight, I realized that the quick arrival of the tow truck likely thwarted any potential harm from the individual who had tried to enter my truck. The tow truck driver's presence and readiness to assist had deterred the stranger from further pursuing me. After my truck was repaired, my friend John and I proceeded with our snowboarding plans, thankful that the situation had not escalated further. I eventually sold the troublesome truck and moved on from the memory of that night, understanding that my instincts had guided me through a potentially dangerous encounter. When I was 17, I had my first girlfriend, and we were both in our senior year of high school. I lived with my mom due to my parents' divorce when I was 11. One day, I asked my girlfriend out on a date, and she agreed. We both worked day shifts. I worked at a local grocery store, and she worked at Starbucks. We decided to go to a small restaurant for our date due to budget constraints. Afterward, we hung out at her house for a while. As the evening progressed and it got dark, my girlfriend expressed disappointment that our date was short. I explained that my financial situation limited our options. We decided to go on a night drive instead. We drove around town and eventually ended up on a dirt road in the woods. We got out of the car to relieve ourselves, but we were hit by an awful smell that seemed to come from another person who had also pulled over. After we finished, we heard a noise that sounded like a twig snapping. Fearing it might be an animal, we quickly returned to my car. However, just before I opened the car door, we heard a scream of fear or pain coming from the direction where we had just been. Despite my girlfriend's pleas to stay put, I decided to investigate. To make her feel safer, I locked the car doors, turned on my phone's flashlight, and took a picture in the direction of the sound. As the flash went off, I saw a man standing there in a white shirt with black stripes holding a blue tarp in front of him. My fear overcame me and I dashed back to the car, unlocked the doors, and sped away as fast as I could. My girlfriend noticed my fear, and once we were back at her house, I explained what had happened and showed her the picture. We were both thoroughly creeped out by the encounter. My girlfriend allowed me to spend the night at her place. Due to our unease, we remained close friends after our relationship ended, even though we were no longer dating. Despite the passage of time, that experience remains the scariest moment of my life, and it's something my friend and I still talk about, even though we're now 23 and 22 years old, respectively.